Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. The Las Vegas Review-Journal is challenging the freest and fairest election narrative we often hear. Well, they aren't exactly making that argument, but I think the facts speak for themselves. They posted on X, numerous Nevada voters looked at their voter history and found that their mail ballots were counted in the recent primary, even though they didn't participate in it. The article they linked to goes on to explain how that is the result of a coding error, in which ballots that were sent out but not filled out and returned were appearing on the website as a counted vote. The Nevada Secretary of State's office was quick to assure everyone that the problem would be fixed soon, and that the error did not affect the vote counting or tabulation in the primary in any way. Well, that's all nice to hear. The problem for many voters is that their confidence is very low in how elections are handled. We've been lied to by those in power for so long that it's hard to trust anything they say if we can't verify it for ourselves. To that point, the article describes, quote, Las Vegas resident and registered Republican Daphne Lee said she and her family checked the Secretary of State's website on Sunday to see their voter history after she heard from a few people that their voting history was incorrect. The site showed that she and her family's mail-in ballots were counted for the primary, even though none of them participated in the election. She tried to opt out of future mail-in ballots and was met with a message saying she was not currently registered to vote and her voting history no longer existed. It's just so frustrating, Lee said in a phone interview. This makes everyone uncomfortable, end quote. Now, even assuming that the Secretary of State's office is being entirely truthful in addressing this coding error, none of this bodes well for November, when we know for sure that bad actors will be looking for every flaw in the system to exploit. And one of their favorite tools to use, which has nothing to do with ballots or the way in which they're counted, has to do instead with psyops and censorship and propaganda, which is exactly what our next guest writes about in his new article for The Federalist. It's titled, Government-Backed Censors Who Rigged the 2020 Election Are Now Stealing 2024. Joining us now to discuss is the author of that piece, John Daniel Davidson, senior editor for The Federalist. John, welcome back tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So you write this article about a recent interview that Tucker Carlson did with Mike Benz. Can you lay out that context for us? Who is Mike Benz?
Mike Benz is probably the leading expert on government censorship and cybersecurity, cyber infrastructure. And he did this fascinating hour-long, in-depth interview with Tucker Carlson last week that everybody should go watch if you want to understand what is happening to our election systems, what's happening to the censorship industrial complex, as we call it at The Federalist. It's a fascinating interview, and it exposes the ways in which the government, specifically the foreign policy and defense establishments, weaponized tools that they developed to deploy overseas to be able to manipulate foreign governments and to be able to, pull things off like the Arab Spring, and turned those things on the United States and on U.S. citizens. One of the most startling things Mike Benz says in this interview is that the two most censored events in human history were the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2020 election.
That they were. And, like you're talking about with these tools that we've developed over so many decades, you crack open a history book and you read about the overthrow of the Shah of Iran the Prime Minister of Iran in 1953. And you just read about what's happened in Central America with the CIA. And you just see all the tools and the literal fake news that they created to psyop the public into going along with it. And then you close the book and go, well, they just did that in that country. Then you have to stop and think, no, wait a second. They have those tools. They've had them for decades. They've only gotten better since as technology's advanced. We just have to assume, and we've seen it play out, they're using a lot of those tricks here at home on us. And so your article dives into some of that. I have a part of your quote here. You talk about how the problem here is profound with deep historical roots that go back to the aftermath, you say, of World War II and the creation of the CIA, along with a host of U.S.-funded international institutions. You say, but for our purposes, it suffices to understand the problem in its two most recent stages. So you break it up from the period of 1991 to 2014 and then 2014 to present. So I know there's a lot that goes into those years, but if you'd like to perhaps lay out some of it for our audience right now.